Hello and welcome to this section of the chemistry tutor. In this section we're going to continue working these acid-base titration problems and just gradually building our skills with different types of problems. But don't forget that on all of these titration problems the central theme is always the same. Basically you have an acid and a base coming together. Usually the problem is trying to essentially ask you how much of one reactant is needed to neutralize or to titrate the other reactant. That's basically what's happening. So in this problem we have a similar situation going on, but it is a little bit more wordy. So the trick is when you're reading these acid-base problems, you might think, a lot of students, they try to classify problems in different buckets, and whenever they figure out what bucket it's in, then they know how to solve it. Well, I'm trying to teach you not so much to do that, I'm trying to teach you how to think, so that you can decipher what the problem's saying and you can figure out for yourself how to get there. So the same thing is going on here. It looks like it's a complicated problem of a different type, but once we discuss it, you'll see that it's really something that you've already been doing. You just need to think a little bit. So the problem says, what volume of sodium hydroxide, molarity of that guy is 0.550 molar. So what volume of 0.550 molar sodium hydroxide is needed to titrate a 10 milliliter sample of vinegar that is 4.12% by mass of acetic acid of CH3COOH. Vinegar has a density of 1.01 grams per milliliter. So your first thought when you read a problem like this, when we've been doing all of these acid-base reactions, you read something like this and you start thinking a lot of times, okay, this is totally different than what we've been doing. You know that it has an acid and a base in it, but because of these numbers here, like the percentage and this guy here, the density, it looks to be something totally different than what you have experience with. But you need to go back to what you know. You know that you're titrating something here. That's a huge keyword, right? And you know that there's a base involved and there's an acid involved. You should know by now that vinegar is an acid, and the acid that's in there is acetic acid. Vinegar is just a word that we use that just says that, okay, acetic acid is mixed in with water. That's all that is. That's what we call vinegar, right? So anytime you see vinegar or acetic acid, you should be thinking acid. Anytime you see a hydroxide like this, you should be thinking bases, and you're titrating it. So ultimately what you're doing is you have a certain amount of, in this case, it's an acid. It says you have a 10 milliliter sample of acid, of vinegar, right? You have a certain amount of it. And ultimately the question is, what volume of this base is needed to titrate it? So you see, when you strip everything away from the problem, ultimately it's asking you the same thing that all of the other titration problems have been asking you. It's asking you how much of this base is needed in order to neutralize this certain amount of acid that we have. In this case, the acid is acetic acid.